Welcome back to Sensical Politics, where common sense meets politics. I'm your co-host, Tyler McDonald, and tonight I'm joined by...
Spencer Sembra, along with
Jeremy Holt.
And tonight we've got a few interesting topics that we're going to be talking about. The first is the NFL and the whole players kneeling during the national anthem. Going to be giving our opinions on that, all that good stuff. Then we're going to be talking about an upcoming Supreme Court case. It's not there yet, but we're predicting that it's going to get there. And then we're going to be talking about taxation. I wrote an article about it about a month ago about whether or not taxation is actually literally just another word for theft. So we're going to be giving our opinions on that. And then Spencer is going to share his interaction with a fellow classmate in his poli-sci class, which is going to be a fun experience for all of us. So getting into it, let's talk about the NFL and the kneeling during the national anthem. What's your opinion on that, Jeremy?
Well, see, the thing is, like, sports isn't, like, important to everyone in politics, and especially not me. I've never been really, like, an NFL fan. But it always has bothered me whenever people in the media or anywhere have ill regard for the flag that is raised in this country. I was handed a flag twice whenever both of my grandfathers died, both being veterans from World War II. And there are men and women across this country every day who have friends, family, husbands come home in a casket with that flag draped on it. And it's important to realize that whenever there are people protesting something as sacred as that flag flag has a meaning to a lot of people. And you can't draw attention to something like racial issues in America by attacking the most American thing there is. The most American song and the most American symbol. It's just not feasible, and it seems to lack nuance.
Yeah, I agree with that. Obviously, the people obviously have the right to do it. They shouldn't have any, law enforcement force them to stand or anything, though. Although I do think it would be in the NFL team owners' best interest to, I think, make it required for them to stand, because obviously, as you can see throughout the country, most of the country wants them standing. So if you want to cater to your audience, you kind of do what they want. But I also understand the other side of not standing in protest, quote unquote, for racial issues and stuff like that. It is interesting how President Trump is able to find these super polarizing issues and basically make the left look so bad off of it, which is kind of almost guaranteeing him more votes for his reelection. Whether he's doing that actively trying to get votes for reelection, I'm not really sure. I doubt it. But as Ben Shapiro said, he's almost using reverse psychology on the left the same way Ben Shapiro uses it on his 3-year-old. He says, "Oh, I bet you can't eat that all your dinner. I bet you're not big enough." And then she goes, "Yeah, I can." And so she eats it. And President Trump's kind of doing the same thing. He's going, "I bet you won't stand or I bet you won't kneel for a national anthem." And then they go, "Yeah, we will." And then they do. And then all the normal Americans in Michigan and North Carolina and Alabama and all these swing states, Alabama wasn't, but all these states that kind of carried Trump in the election look at these people kneeling and they go, well, why are they doing that? And it kind of gives Trump another vote. I think that's my opinion. So I think it's pretty smart for Trump, but not really helping the country too much. Tyler, what do you think?
Well, I mean, yeah, I want to stress the fact that it is within their rights to do such a thing. I mean, technically, as long as they're not calling for any sort of action that's violence, then they should be, legally speaking, allowed to do it. But I do think it kind of really demonstrates the difference, the huge divide between the leftist elites and the actual people and the middle class citizens and the lower class citizens of America. I mean, it's funny because the left chooses to nominate these people as ways to speak like these actors and these actresses and these football players and these famous people as like their ways to speak to the public. But it's funny because I just don't think anyone really like respects these people enough to be like, okay, I actually take their like opinion seriously. As in like for example, these football people are being paid to play football. They're not being paid to think politically, or they're not, they don't know politics well enough. They just know what they just know what they're being told. And so at least from people that I've talked to, don't really respect people's political opinions well enough, especially, I mean, again, actors, actresses too, to really, care that much. And again, it kind of like shows the divide. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember, but when they got really famous actresses together, actors and actresses together, and they made that video about Trump, and it's like, he must be stopped. He must be stopped. And then like the Hulk came on. He's like, he must be stopped. And like all those people came on. And I mean, look at where that got them. I mean, Trump is in the presidency, and like the divide between the leftist elites and the average working American has never been farther apart. So I don't think it's really working. And I don't really like what they're doing, because I do think it kind of is. I mean, I don't respect what they're doing at all. And, I would not kneel for the anthem. I mean, even if I thought America, like what I don't understand is somehow they're equating the flag with America. And while I do sort of see where they're coming from, I don't really think it's like a close enough connection that it's like disrespecting one and somehow shows your, like, I just think it like divides the country more than it really needs to.
I don't understand that, like they say it brings attention to it, but it doesn't solve anything at all. And I feel like most of the people that were kneeling were just kneeling just to show Trump that he can't tell them not to kneel, which is pointless.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because it's kind of like, oh, you're disrespecting the flag, but just for the purpose of like disrespecting this one person. But there are like other ways. I don't know.
And actually tonight, the Steelers was the first NFL team to say that everyone will be standing for the flag on their team now. Because remember that one guy was the only guy to stand, Alexandro or whatever, and then he later said like, "Oh, I made my team look bad," but at the same time, Ben Roethlisberger, the QB for the team, said like he couldn't sleep that night because he had his team stay inside during the national anthem because he says it was disrespectful, and now they came out and said everyone will be standing for the flag. So I mean, it's almost like Trump got what he wanted.
Yeah, I mean, leftists like to talk about the divide between like the wealth, the 99%, the 1%, but there's a much larger divide between the people who like America and the people who seemingly want to pit themselves against everyone, and they don't realize that the people that they're trying to get, like the working class, the middle class, are very American. Most of America is very American, actually. And they have to realize that this is not a vote-winning strategy at all. All it does is make Democrats happy, makes Republicans angry, and everyone in the middle is just like, why are you guys doing this?
Speaking, just a quick segue of you saying the 1% and the Bernie thing. Bernie Sanders tweeted yesterday, meanwhile, the Walton family of Walmart has a net worth of $144 billion. This is what a rigged economy looks like. I read that, and it has 13,000 retweets and 30,000 likes of people agreeing with him. And I see like a group of people that just do not either understand freedom, don't want freedom, or just don't care. And it's sad. Just a quick segue.
Yes. Yeah. As someone who's currently reading Atlas Shrugged, which is now pretty much my favorite book, I'm kind of like a little bit annoyed that I haven't read it sooner. Wow, that just shows like a lack of really caring at all, and like a lack of doing any research at all. Holy, like Walmart provides so many poor people with like, without Walmart, the quality of life of the average like lower class citizen in the United States and in most countries would be much lower. That is why getting into taxation with money, literally you cannot make money without providing I mean, this is like the way that the free market system is supposed to work. Obviously, sometimes it doesn't work, but I would most of the time blame that on the government intervening and then allowing for these different pathways to be entered. But for the most part, the only way to make money is by providing a service that other people want, which in itself is moral. Like you're pretty much saying that I can only survive by helping my fellow citizen, and that's the only way to actually make money. That's why the Wallen family is so rich, is because they came up with an idea. Like they literally created something that revolutionized the world. Like it helped so many people, and that's why they're so rich. And yet for some reason the left and like socialists believe that all their money, or a large chunk of their money, should be taken away and should just be given to people who didn't create something that didn't help their fellow citizens. How is that? That's the opposite of morality. You're telling someone who has helped large parts of the community, you're telling them, hey, we're going to take large sums of your money that you worked for, that you helped people to make that money, and we're going to give it to people who didn't help their fellow citizen as much, even though maybe they didn't have the opportunity to help their fellow citizen as much. And yes, maybe that's just how, sometimes people are unlucky, sometimes people are lucky. But I have the strong belief that if you help your fellow citizen and you try your hardest, number one, you will end up better than your parents were, and then your kids will end up better than you were, et cetera, et cetera. As long as you keep providing services and goods that are needed, you will slowly, that's how you get out of poverty. And saying anything opposite, I mean, I do believe that taxation is just like another word for theft. I mean, all you're doing is, without justification, you're just saying, hey, this money that you earned, yeah, that's now mine.
Right.
It makes me mad.
We can segue that again into taxation. Tyler wrote an article on taxation, whether it's theft from the government. And Tyler, you want to take a quick summary on that, what you wrote?
Well, sure. So I pretty much made the point that there are certain things that the government does need to take care of, right? And I personally believe that the only role the government has is to protect its citizens' rights, both internationally, or like as in like domestically speaking and internationally speaking, and to provide their citizens with a few services that help to protect them. And by that I pretty much mean, upkeep of roads, and then like fire departments, all that stuff, like things that no private corporation may be able to make money off of. Not because okay, that's going to go down the wrong line, though. I'll probably write an article about that eventually. But, just that there is a certain level of taxation where it is okay, because, I mean, it is still technically thievery, but you're doing this thievery. I mean, it's kind of almost as if, like, the ends justify the means, which I know isn't really always true. But, that's the case, and that's this case. And that what we should do, though, as a society, is that we should minimize this bad thing that is stealing from your fellow citizen for the sake of the greater good. So I think we should try to minimize that. And I did admit that there were certain types of taxation that was like, okay, that's reasonable, to keep at least a military that can protect its citizens. I don't want to get into whether or not we should expand our military, but at least a military that can protect its citizens, and anything else that the private like industry can't do, which I think is very little. But there's a few things.
Why would it be wrong?
To
play devil's advocate, why would it be wrong to tax for healthcare then, if everyone needs it and private can't do it?
Well, I mean, I would argue that private can do it.
What could private do? Policing and stuff?
I mean, yeah, that would be my point. Something like policing, I don't know if private could do that well. I mean, we've never tried it out, so I wouldn't know. Like
Well, there actually has in the past been private bodyguard services. I mean, if we want to take a real throwback back to the 1920s and 30s, when we had the Pinkertons, or well, actually before that, the late 1800s, the Pinkertons that big companies would hire to bust up any chance of unions forming.
Okay, so that is I guess, but that's not really like policing. That's just
it's enforcing some type of rule, is what the case is. But I mean, I do agree that policing is something that the government actually has to take care of, because it's the government's job to Well, it's the executive branch's job to enforce law. Therefore, the executive branch has the authority to create a police service to be able to enforce law. That's one of the roles of government inscribed in the Constitution.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and so, but I mean, besides like a very small amount of services, I don't think the government should do much more than that. I think we should leave most of it up to the private markets.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and so, yeah, that's just my take on it. So, at some point, I think I'll probably write an article more in depth, but that's just a basic summary of it. So, Jeremy, did you want to give us your opinion on the whole Supreme Court case? It's not actually a case yet, but it will be soon.
Yeah, so I forget what the name of it is. I don't have it in front of me. But there is a Supreme Court case that's going to be going forth on the first part of this term where Gorsuch is going to be full-time on his position on the Supreme Court. A very exciting time in the nation, yes, I know. But this particular case has to do with labor union dues. The question of whether or not a person, if you don't agree with the union or you feel like the union doesn't represent you, if you can retract the dues that you're required to pay. So whenever you're in a public sector job that is a union, so like say teaching or a medical profession doctor, even though you didn't like apply to be in a union, say you're like not a Democrat and you just sort of showed up to the job one day, but the union is there and the union actually represents you, even though you never really had a contract, and you are actually required to, in lots of states, to provide for full union dues. And in certain states, you only have to provide for the union representation dues, not the full dues, which would cover political ambitions, yeah, aka donations to the Democrats.
So they're voting on.
So the Supreme Court is going to be deciding on whether or not this is a legal practice that the unions are allowed to, without any regard to a personal opinion, collect dues upon anybody in that union.
Constitutionally, right?
So it could make a significant blow to labor union, the ability for them to be able to collect money, because in regards to polling, the majority of people who are in or rather represented by a labor union say they would not send in labor dues if it weren't required. So this could be very, very monumental. And it is. And I believe there's also another Supreme Court case that went 4-4 while Gorsuch wasn't on the board, whenever Justice Scalia was still unreplaced. That has another thing to do with labor union representation and such. And with these cases, and with Gorsuch influencing them, certainly we're going to see a bigger conservative swing in public policy in regards to the strength of labor unions. And we're going to see it over the course of the next few years, I believe. So as long as Republicans keep power, labor union become less and less relevant.
Yeah, that's good too, right?
Yes. I mean, labor unions are important, I think, for private sector jobs, certain ones, to ensure like safety regulations and that nobody's being unfairly taken advantage of in cases that it matters. Public sector unions are just leeches on tax money, basically. They make it so that way in regards to teaching. They make it so that way bad teachers never get fired. And good teachers get sent to only good places, and all the bad schools never get any new blood that can actually save that place. And then unions in the medical industry just put a bigger stranglehold on the bureaucracy and insanity that is the healthcare industry in America. It's absolutely insane.
When is that going to the Supreme Court?
Yeah.
I had just read about it today. Like the story was breaking today, so it shouldn't be
voting on that.
That farther than a year away.
Private business rights with the cake, the baker baking the wedding cake.
They will also be voting on that as well soon.
I cannot see how constitutionally that can
So
be allowed. I mean, allowed as in
yes,
forcing him to bake someone a cake.
yes,
I
there's going to
mean,
be big conservative rulings. What's your take on it, Tyler?
I was just going to talk about the whole unions thing. I mean, that's like another thing happening like with the government and just being like more authoritarian and giving itself more power is unions shouldn't be, at least in my personal opinion, unions should not be allowed to do something like that. And I'll like for example, right? My part of the problem, the reason why I have a problem with like government intervening and all this stuff is because normally it doesn't really help and it just makes it worse. So like, I mean, one of the reasons why a lot of like monopolies in the past have like existed is because and in my opinion, like for most cases, 99% of the time, if not more, 99% of like all monopolies that have ever existed have only existed because of government intervention, right? Government intervening. And normally what happens is the government places some sort of restriction on a business entering the market, or workers entering the market, which either increases supply or decreases supply, or increases demand, or even either way. I mean, it just happens to do with whatever industry it is. And then that usually results in one company having more power than any other company, even if it's not innovating and even if it's not doing the things that requires it. The government just steps in and says, no, we need to help you out here. Like I'll give you an example, like through the bailouts, right? That was kind of a thing where these banks clearly weren't helping the public, right? They weren't making enough money. Like the public had decided as a whole that that these banks, that we're not going to go to these banks anymore. I know there is a more complicated reason behind the crash and everything, but that is part of the reason why. And so I feel like with these unions as well, when they're making workers who enter in this field have to automatically pay like money, dues to these unions just because they're in the field, I feel like that is definitely unconstitutional. I feel like that's I don't think I feel like you shouldn't be that burden shouldn't be placed on a person just for choosing a certain path of employment. That doesn't seem right to me, and I feel like that just hurts society in general, and I just feel like that hurts that industry more, and it allows for certain like monopolistic practices to take place by like these unions, where they start to defend people that agree with them and they don't really defend people that don't, and then you're still forced to pay them money. I mean, it's one of the most terrible things I can think of, where these people that are making money for the unions are forced to pay the unions, even if they personally disagree with the unions. I mean, I think it's like despicable. I mean, that's kind of one of the things that in Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand's talking about, where it's like these politicians that are getting paid by the taxpayers are putting more burdens on the taxpayer while being supported by the taxpayer. Like it's absolutely ridiculous. And I feel like the union is like the same concept, is that these people who may not actually like personally support the union are financially forced to support it, which again, I feel like goes against your constitutional rights.
Yeah, and in Pennsylvania right now, Pennsylvania is a big labor union state. I'm sure many are aware. But our legislature is gearing up to have a big bill on a new age of workers' rights. And what they're doing is making it so that way, if less than 50% of people in the current professions at a certain building have not voted on that union ever, then there has to be a revote. And if the vote fails, the union's gone. And which I believe is probably one of the most excellent things that needs to happen across the country, is that people who want to have a labor union in their profession, they should vote on it. It should be democratic. Everyone should agree. And then we wouldn't have this problem about labor dues at all, really.
Is Pennsylvania the only state?
Huh, I like that idea.
Is Pennsylvania the only state that does that?
Pennsylvania is voting on it. I know because I'm a Pennsylvanian and I follow the legislature, but I don't know if anyone else is. All I know is that Pennsylvania is a labor union state because of the steel industry, and B, that's happening.
Yeah, I feel like unions don't really help the people that they're supposed to be helping. I can't remember who said it, but I heard this one quote at some point. It's like, if you, for specifically referencing the teachers union, it's like, if the teachers unions are for it, it's probably not actually helping the kids. It's probably helping the teachers, not the kids. So, I mean, I kind of believe that to be true. So, they don't really watch out for the people that they're actually supposed to be looking out for, just the members themselves, which, specifically for the teachers union, I think is despicable.
Yeah, in academia, they always look after each other, which brings us to our final topic of the day. The political science major in many colleges across the country is ridden with leftist professors, and colleges typically have lots of liberals, and Spencer has a little story to share with us about his political science course experience. So, Spencer?
All right, so I needed 12 credits for the first semester, so I figured I'd take all my core classes, get them out of the way freshman year, but then I still had an extra spot for an elective left over, so I was like, oh, all right, I'm interested in politics, I'll take a political science class. So the one I ended up taking was American government. I was like, all right, I'll get to learn a little bit more of how, the three branches work together, all the state level, federal level, all that stuff. And I mean, I guess I kind of am, but oftentimes we get sidetracked, which I guess is part of the curriculum because we get sidetracked a lot and the teacher kind of like leads us through debate and all that stuff. So for a pretty long time normally. But the funny thing is I guess I'll share two stories because they're both pretty short. But there's some girl, there's like 4 girls in the class and like 10 guys. And one of the girls sits up in the front row in the middle. I hope I'm not mispronouncing her, but she has red hair. She always wears like men's basketball shorts, wears like tennis shoes, which I mean, okay, fine. She wears guys' clothes, that's fine. But every time the teacher is talking about the LGBTQ group, whether they like the percentage of them in Congress or how they voted in the last election, all that kind of stuff, the teacher always forgets, in quotes, to add a plus sign to the end of LGBTQ. And I think 4 times so far, we've had 3 classes. Every time she's done that, the girl up front says, kind of almost offended, like, oh, you forgot the plus sign and stuff like that. And I'm not even kidding, everyone kind of laughs in the class at her, just because of how stupid it is. And I've seen that happen on like YouTube videos and stuff, and I was like, oh, that's funny, but like, I don't think I'd ever actually see that happen. And then I saw that happen right in front of my eyes. And at the second example of liberals being triggered in my class, I guess, was we were talking about minorities in Congress, I think it was. So she's like, 7% of them are like Latino, 20% are women, stuff like that. 3% are like gay, stuff like that. And so I raised my hand and I said, I don't really care what ethnicity they are or gender they are, as long as they were voted in to have the interest of all Americans in mind, which I think they are, which is why they were voted in. So I don't really care if it's all women, all men, all Latino. Like, I don't care as long as they have the interests of the American people in mind. And this other girl, replying back to me, said that I can't have an opinion on minorities unless I've ever been a minority. And I, being a white male, have never been a minority. So I'm going to have to sit that conversation out because I don't know what it's like. So I just thought that was funny. I got triggered there. But I just thought that was funny. Seeing it firsthand, the left at work in our educational system.
Yeah, I mean, it's very disappointing whenever race is brought into the conversation in such a rude manner that imagine the exuberance of somebody to say that, like, I can't talk about like things that happen to French people because I'm not French.
Right.
Not,
Exactly.
implying that I can't read, that I can't experience, learn, watch what's going on.
Right.
And that's even a more ridiculous example because you're talking about like I don't care what those people are because if they're voted in to represent the people that they're representing, then that's fine. That's what you
Yeah.
said.
Right. Exactly.
So it's it doesn't even make sense to reply with you can't know about minorities because you've never been one.
Right.
That
It's
like
like
that's a total non sequitur. It doesn't even have anything to do with the topic at hand.
it's like I can't talk about tigers in the jungle because I've never been a tiger. It's just a poor argument, and I mean obviously my professor is a little left leaning, so she kind of brushes off any conservative comments I bring up. Not even conservative, just you know me replying back to her and saying that doesn't make any sense. So we couldn't really have a full discussion of it, but I just thought that was interesting to share.
I mean,
One of the is left to talk about of college campuses, but Tyler.
So I was going to say, one of the things that, separates, at least in my opinion, humans from animals is our ability to picture ourselves in other people's situations, right? To realize that we are not the only, things that can think and that there are other sentient beings around us, and we can place ourselves in those situations and then use logic and reason to make conclusions from those situations. I mean, that's literally one of the things that separates us from most animals as far as I know.
Right.
And so it kind of like that almost, I don't know if you'd call it like empathy, but the ability to place yourself in other people's situations and analyze how you yourself would feel. I mean, again, I think what we gain that ability around 5 or 6 or 7, around that age, when you start to realize that people have different 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 minds, as in I remember hearing this one story about how sometimes
jar?
so what's up?
Oh wait, no. There's a study with the cookie jar where I don't know. Yeah, go on with what you're saying.
So I was going to talk about how I know autistic children can have a tough time learning this, and that's one of the things that can be a difference between a lot of autistic children and normal children, is that they have a really tough time learning the idea of people having different consciousness. So for example, if you show a child who has trouble with this stuff and you show them a box that maybe has a picture of a pencil on it, and you ask them, what do you think is in this box? And they're like, oh, it's probably a pencil. And then you show them what's inside the box and it's not a pencil. And I think in the case I was thinking about, it's I think it was some sort of candy, so Skittles or something. And then you have someone, and then you close the box and you have someone else walk into the room, and and then you ask the child, what do you think this parent or whoever just walked into the room thinks is in the box with the pencils, or that has a pencil on it? And the child, at least the one that has a trouble understanding this, will normally say, oh, the person will think that there are M&Ms in there, because they can't imagine the person that just entered the room not knowing that there are M&Ms in there, because they can't imagine them not knowing something that the child knows themselves. And so it's kind of just interesting how, that's something that most people start to develop by the age of 5 or 6, but these leftists believe that that's not a thing. So
right, yeah, it's just
it's disappointing tribalism is what it is. We're just better. We're better than that.
Yeah.
And it divides.
All right. Well, is there anything else we want to
add? Nothing. Just that we at Sensical Politics are very, very happy for anyone who's listened this far, and we're going to be revving up content very soon.
Yes, we are. Weekly. We're going weekly, baby. All right. Well, since we're going weekly, we'll have a lot more stuff to talk about. Yeah, thanks for listening. Anything else, Tyler?
Well, hashtag never weekly, but some of you guys are gonna get that reference. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, nothing else for really. I mean, the only thing I would recommend is, as someone who is currently reading Atlas Shrugged, I would highly recommend it to anyone who hasn't read it yet. And I know that I've already said that a couple times, but it is really good. You start to pick up some really interesting ideas. And so anyway, that's my one little. I know it's not really I don't know if you call it a plug. Yeah, it's a plug for someone who's dead. But there's my little plug for Ayn Rand.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll see some of you guys down at TPSU in West Palm Beach in December. And I think that's it. All right. We'll talk to you later.